President Cyril Ramaphosa has spoken out against what he calls unilateral, coercive and trade-distorting measures. He was addressing delegates to the United Nations Climate Change Conference currently taking place in Dubai. Ramaphosa also called for climate funding to be scaled up more rapidly and for climate technologies to be regarded as a public good. For more on this conversation, we're joined by Cristiano D'Orsi, former lecturer and senior research fellow of the South African Research and International Law at the University of Johannesburg. Cristiano, appreciate your time. I'd like to start off with President Cyril Ramaphosa's stand and speaking out against what he's called coercive measures and trade-distorting measures. And I suppose it's a good point to start the conversation where there is a pushback from Africa on behalf of Africa by President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes, thank you so much, Hugo, for the invitation. First of all, yeah, it was very important what President Ramaphosa said. In the sense, one of the crucial decisions adopted by the COP28 is the fact that they want to adopt this loss and damage fund for developing countries. That it's, I think, countries and organizations they pledge to give to developing countries $475 million. The problem is that we are still on the pledge situation, and it's not, you don't know exactly when you can obtain that, because it's important to establish a global financial goal to support these developing countries, but on the other side, we need also countries, they also need to see the money. Also because there are also contradictory outcomes until now from the conference. For example, yesterday, while on one side you had 117 countries who adopted a declaration to triple renewable energy by 2030. On the other side, you have about 20 countries, many of them being European and added by the US, that on the contrary, they want to triple the nuclear energy by 2050. So, and still there are a huge debate. We all know that South Africa, for example, gave up to nuclear energy, but there is still, there is still a huge debate if, in effect, nuclear energy can be very useful to, to fight the rising of the global temperature and to achieving the net zero emission by 2050. That there are two of the main of the main points in agenda of the COP28 actually.
So, Cristiano, let's pick up on other issues that came out of the last few days of COP28. Anything notable that you've picked up?
Sorry, Hugo, I can't hear you.
Would you want to walk us through any other notable things that have come out of COP28 that you've picked up?
Oh, yes. I mean, well, the problem is that is this lack of agreement, above all by several big countries. For example, I was mentioning this declaration to triple the renewable energy by 2030. I'm sorry. For example, countries like China and India have shown support for the initiative, but they did not back the overall pledge to this declaration. One of the main problems is that the least developed, landlocked and small island countries may have contributed little to the climate crisis, but on the contrary, they are the ones on the front lines having to deal with the worst consequence of this crisis. So it's still also, we should avoid that the future of the world is decided always by the interest of the same big powers, actually, and this is possibly because often these big powers, they have the divergent interest compared to the rest of the world, and to find a real agreement, it's very difficult. look, not by chance, the COP, they are annual, in the sense that every year countries, they meet to try to, to find an agreement to concretely adopt measures. But until now, they just adopted declarations. If there was a general interest on the measure to adopt, it would not even be useful to meet every single year. It's already scheduled the next COP, the COP 29 next year. So that is the biggest problem. I mean, everyone. Well, let's say that almost the entirety of the world acknowledge the fact that there is a climate crisis, but on how to fight it, that is very divergent. Yesterday, I was listening to the interview of I think it was the Italian Prime Minister, saying that the world needs to fight the climate crisis, but this fighting should not be ideological. What does it mean, ideological? I mean, we have a problem that they are there, and scientifically they have been proved. So so when you have this kind of positions, it's very difficult to find a common view on how to fight this biggest problem. I mean, this big problem, in fact.
Now, how can African countries, in your view, leverage their reserves of critical minerals to negotiate access to... Cristiano, can you hear me?
Now I can. I'm sorry, I lost you for a while, for a bit, for several seconds. How the African countries?
So I was talking about how can African countries leverage their reserves of critical minerals to negotiate access to financing and technologies with developed economies. Do they need to speak more with a singular voice?
Well, most probably, yes. There is still this, although I'm personally contrary in the fact to see Africa as a big country, is a view that is quite common outside Africa. But this is my personal view. It's even offensive because we are talking about 54 sovereign countries. I mean, you don't see Europe as a unique country in the sense that Spain is not like Sweden. But apart from that, but in this particular case, I think that only collaborating and speaking with one voice, it would be much more powerful because, of course, the instances of small countries that they risk to disappear, like Cabo Verde or Sao Tome and Comoros, of course, that they are all in Africa and they are risking a lot of the rise of temperature. Because of the rise of temperature, of course, they won't be hurt. But I think that really, the problem in Africa with energy, they are more or less the same everywhere, of course. And they should insist with renewable energy. And for example, there is this example of this small country, and this Gabon, that outside Africa no one even knows. But Gabon is trying by itself through several measures to try to fight. Apart that, recently, unfortunately, there was even the coup, the political coup. So now we don't know exactly how they will proceed. But until with the former government, it was really trying to adopt measures to fight the climate change, and it was indicated as a good example to follow in Africa. So we can take the example of Gabon and try to see. If this is applicable to the entire continent. But of course, South Africa, as I said, gave up to nuclear energy a long time ago, and is trying to insisting on renewable energy because, of course, it's not fossil that can be the future. We all know that we have to put nature, people, and lives and livelihoods at the heart of climate actions, and what is been doing until now is not really putting nature and people and lives at the heart of that. Afterwards, I think, of course, we are thinking very selfishly because we are not thinking for the next generations, but you know, I'm on the other side. The problem is not so far away like 50 years ago. I mean, it's a really foreseeable future that we are aiming to try to improve. We are not thinking that the measure adopted now, I mean, you know, they can be useful in 50 or 100 years. They in fact, not by chance, all this declaration, you know, to cut or to cut fossil or to improve renewable energy are always a foreseeable date by 2030, by 2050. So it's like tomorrow or after tomorrow. It's not in 200 years.
Cristiano, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us on Newsfeed, the PM edition.